Now it is to Rubina Peroomian, who had her PhD in Near Eastern Languages and Cultures, UCLA. Peroomian has taught Armenian Studies courses at UCLA, Glendale Community College, and the University of Leuven. She has authored several research articles on the Armenian genocide and diaspora literature in English and Armenian in scholarly journals, and has contributed chapters in books. She has lectured widely and made presentations in Armenian English in international symposium. Her last book, The Armenian Genocide in Literature. It is to you, please.
Forward, backward. This one? Okay. The paper that I wrote to present in this conference was rather based on my last book, which is the Armenian Genocide in Literature, the Second Generation Response. But what I will be presenting is a 15-minute, wow, what happened? Okay. Yeah, it will be a 15-minute sketch of that paper. Anyway, here is the outline of what I will be presenting today, just to give you an idea. We are a nation of survivors of genocide, whether or not our parents or grandparents went through the atrocities and death march. We share the memory. Our common history, an important element of our national identity, has the genocide at its core. We carry the burden of the traumatic experience endured by those who survived and vainly tried to return to normal life. The post-1915 immigrant refugees in America faced the tough and demanding struggle of adjusting to a totally new and unfamiliar situation. They formed ghettos and locked themselves in to practice their culture, preserve their identity, and avoid confrontation with the suspicion and prejudice of the mainstream society. That was their principal tool of survival. To trace the dynamics of post-genocide Armenian ethnic identity within the temporal and spatial conditions in America, I draw upon the artistic expressions of the generation born to these survivors' refugees, that is, the literary responses of the second generation to their unique experience, to their unique situation. At one end of the spectrum of these diverse responses, we see the reverberation of a psychology of victimized exilee, planted by the survivor parent. Then comes the transformation, conditioned by a continuing tension between the polarities of inside and outside, the quest for identity, the struggle to reconcile the transmitted memories of parents' traumatic past with the schemata of their cognitive world models. Confrontation with the exigencies of the acquired sense of belonging and citizenship, which, as Dexter Fisher suggests, imposes constantly and forges the ethnic duality. American Armenian, or an American with Armenian roots. At the other end of the spectrum is acquiescence or total assimilation. In the close atmosphere of the ghettoized Armenian communities, parents raise their children with the inflexible customs, outlooks, traditions, and set of values of the old world, even with some repression. They instilled in them a large dosage of Armenianness, with admonitions like, "You are Armenian and don't you forget," or "My family perished in the desert and you have to compensate for their loss by staying close to your roots." That was the way to fight assimilation. They tended to name their children after family members they lost to Turkish atrocities. The name thus became a constant reminder of what was lost. It became a fragmented memory, a niche within identificatory modalities. Nonetheless, The reality in the outside world was there with its own impositions. The duality of the strictly Armenian home and the vast societal opportunities outside became a source of constant tension, which in many cases resulted in fits of resentment and rebellion at home and alienation and marginality outside. For Helen Piliposyan, home was very much Armenian and school was very much American. Lor Shirinyan had drifted into some nether zone that appeared to exist between two cultures not belonging to one or the other. Virginia Harutyunyan's strict mother considered going out with friends or dating as improper and immoral. Or the street girls sit in a car alone with a boy. Virginia felt an intense desire to become a true American, to cast out everything foreign. Diana Derhovanisyan is constantly in search of reconciliation between the two voices, speaking to her, speaking to each other, each trying to find preference over the other. She writes, "I found the bloodied arm on the ground before me. You didn't need it," said the voice. "I saw a sea of dismembered limbs tossed, strewn on the horizon and beyond. You didn't really need these bones. They covered land and stretched, pressed past. You didn't need these provinces, did you? What would you do with all these stones? A mountain of broken bodies rose. You didn't need Mount Anarad, did you?" I tried to speak. No tongue. My breath froze. "You didn't need that language, did you?" I will skip Peter Najarian's Voyages, the site of the painful conflict and attempted reconciliation, showing the doom of the second generation, and also his Daughters of Memory, where he confronts the spirit of history of our species who kill each other, and his grandmother who was slaughtered in the desert. David Hrant had a strictly Armenian childhood, but he felt discrimination coming from Otars. The Americans looked down on them, calling them dirty Armenians. He resented this feeling of inferiority, tried hard to distance himself from everything Armenian. His resistance to Armenian food, his preference for everything American, his arguments with his father were all symptoms of his alienated soul, caught between a past he despised and ignored and a world of present around him he so enthusiastically embraced. It is only after his father's death that Hrant experiences posthumous bonding, a feeling of guilt and regret. "Why have I waited until your death to know the earth you were turning was Armenia, the color of the fence your homage to Adana, and your other complaints over my own complaints were addressed to your homesickness brought by my English." Hagop Karapets has an array of characters caught in the struggle to adjust to their dual identity, like the one between the two personalities in Hrant's identity, the American Hrant and the Armenian Hrant. And Hrant says, "I have suffered when playing with kids of my age in streets of San Francisco. They did not understand my language and called me quarrelsome Syriac. I suffered when in school no one had heard the name Armenia." Michael J. Arlen's case is quite atypical, as he grew up in a non-Armenian or pretended non-Armenian family. However, he writes, "I became conscious of being accompanied by a kind of a shadow of being Armenian, and that shadow finally caught up with him. The past his father had tried to efface in his life extended its influence upon him. He traveled to Armenia to face his mixed feelings. On the last day of his visit, he stood at the brink of the eternal flame, shedding tears of self-realization, feeling the hand of his dead father in his. Michael J. Arlen had found his Armenian identity. Hrant Khachadurian set out to reveal who he was, The call of his roots took him to Turkey to see why being Armenian in 1915 would amount to death sentence. A visit or a pilgrimage? This Armenian group and individual visits to Turkey, as Carol characterized it as pilgrimage, were in search for maternal or paternal towns, villages, even homes. The trip usually begins with apprehension, even reluctance. But the outcome, one way or another, is always tangible and effective. It generates a concretization of the inherited but imaginary sense of belonging, a face-to-face encounter with the Armenian component of their identity. Hrant Markaryan traveled with a group to his father's birthplace, Shushansk, a village near Van, to follow the path of his father and thousands of others who left their home and belongings on the spur of the moment and marched toward the unknown. All along this journey, the group met with the ignorance or pretended ignorance of the local Kurds and Turks about Armenians having lived in these lands, about previous owners of the houses, churches, and institutions. Markaryan's was a close encounter with the denial of the Armenian genocide. Arpine Gronier took such a trip to her father's Konya. She was gradually exposed to see the likeness and the differences. She pleasantly navigated within the Turkish language like an inherited but temporarily forgotten treasure. She returned transformed. As she writes, moving from unknowingly being Armenian Turkishly to knowingly becoming American Armenianly. Alicia Girogosyan writes, we exist here and there, here and now, but just in halves, as we also belong there, where old voices are still haunting us. What is evident, though, is that these pilgrimages do not always bring closure. The sight of ruined Armenian towns and villages and vestiges of Armenian culture, churches deliberately destroyed or turned into stables, mosques, or museums at best. The ignorance denial of the locals about the Armenian presence there cannot attenuate the pain and work toward reconciliation. The Armenian language occupies a primary place in the conceptualization of identification modalities by many, especially writers who themselves write in Armenian. Malgré tout, the evanescence of the Armenian language in the rapid decline of its use is a fact in America. Diana Derovanisyan, like many others in her generation, has lost that component. She describes how the Armenian language became compartmentalized, limited to the subjects pertaining home, sweet memories of childhood, gradually becoming her lost treasure, a gift we are letting drift away. Arpine Gronier asserts, my mother tongue lost me, using a formulation that puts the blame on the Armenian language for having lost her. Joshua Fishman, a sociolinguist, regards language to be one of the most important symbols of ethnicity and maintains that all distinguishing features of ethnicity are signified with it and within it. Stephen Jacobs, a second-generation Holocaust survivor, considers language to be the vehicle to provide a multi-generational foundation for their continuing survival. But after all, is speaking Armenian such an important component? I do not believe in such heavy accentuation. The concept of postmodern ethnicity defines the place of mother tongue differently, in a setting where the subject is exposed to multiple languages. Livia Kate Whitman's study, Language and Postmodern Ethnic Identities, reveals a parallel situation with the Armenian case. She joins Fishman in defining postmodern ethnicity as a stance of simultaneously transcending ethnicity as a complete self-contained system, but retaining it as a selectively preferred, involving, participatory system. This leads to a kind of self-correction from within and, I'm done, almost, within and without, which extreme nationalism and racism do not permit. The battle is not lost, though. The Armenian language and culture are a part of the Armenian national identity. The relentless efforts of the crusaders of the preservation of the Armenian language stem from their firm conviction that the vitalization of the oral and written use of Armenian language is essential to the sustainability of Armenian culture and identity in the diaspora. The Gulbenkian Foundation is involved in that, and a group of us that are working in Los Angeles. And now a new phenomenon, the factor of independent Armenia today. I will skip the Soviet period and unfortunate tension and clashes between Soviet Armenia and American Armenian mindsets, only to say that it was excruciating for those who lived their lives yearning for the homeland to feel like a stranger in Armenia, to realize that what they had spiritually embraced is not theirs, has never been theirs. The reality of the existence and accessibility of Armenia today, albeit only in the eastern corner of Armenian historic homeland, and therefore not including the land to which a great majority of American Armenians attached some sort of sense of belonging, has introduced a significant shift in the understanding of identity and sense of belonging. The second generation basically lost the opportunity of imbibing from that genuine source of strength and inspiration. And I'm not talking about political or any other. It's just the water, the soil, the nature, the Armenia being there. But for the younger generation, Armenia is the source to inspire national pride, a pleasant and not annoying sense of belonging. It is a positive factor in the shaping and reshaping of the Armenian ethnocultural identity, despite the fact that even the new repatriates are called akhbars, and all settlers from Armenia in America are looked down upon and still called Hayastansis. I firmly believe that ethnic identity is not a fixed, unchangeable concept. One has to look at it in its dynamics, or as Louis Henry Tate puts it, one should look at identity politics, changing through time. That identity politics in Armenian communities in America in the first stages of its formation in post-1915 was in its purest. And it entailed the perpetuation of that identity in its rigidity, in the form of persistence of and accentuation of differences. This concept, however, is acclimatized, acculturated. In this process, the influence of dominant culture plays an essential role. It is also clear that ethnic tradition, another important component of ethnic identity, is never fixed or closed and is subject to change. My argument is that the Armenian nationalism is not that rigid to the point of racism. Change is welcome, even desirable, since, as Fishman maintains, ethnicity is permeable. Important is to retain, as Fishman puts it, the recognition of the putative biological origins. We can call them Armenian heritage or historical roots. Thank you.